All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between. Your boy Jackie, RL Jackie, is back with another reaction video, reacting to KTO, should be like right here, KTO, the most disappointing teams of 2024, figured right before the playoffs start officially today. Who you got? Put them in the comments. I would react to this, see if I agree, see if I disagree, what teams I would have put in. So let me know what you think. Go subscribe to the guy KTO, but also click the subscribe button here. Also comment, like, rate, and share whatever you want to do. And listen to Red Light Homies every Monday. Appreciate it. Let's go.
I covered the teams in the NFL that were surprisingly good this season, which ended up being a pretty short video because ultimately there weren't too many of them.
I didn't watch that video, but were the Eagles, if the Eagles were in his surprisingly good video, were we really that surprised? I mean, the biggest piece they lost was what? Jason Kelsey, Hall of Fame center, but the rest of that offensive line was still great. And the addition of Saquon Barkley, I think everybody knew Saquon Barkley was going to go off. Now, the turmoil in the front office, I know I'm already yapping 9 seconds into the video, but the turmoil, the turmoil on the coaching staff, obviously that was, a problem. But the rest of the NFC East wasn't really looking that great. The Commanders were shocked this year, but the Cowboys sucked. The Giants sucked. So the Eagles being surprisingly good, I don't really agree with. 9 seconds into the video, already a large yap session. I apologize.
However, on the other end of the spectrum, there were more disappointments than surprisingly good teams in 2024. Now, let's get one thing clear. Just because a team was terrible doesn't mean that they count as a disappointment for this video. Here's my criteria. Teams must have been projected to be around 500 or better, meaning that they would have been competing for a playoff seed. Here's the bad teams this season that don't qualify to be in this video. The Saints, Panthers, Patriots, Titans, Giants, and Raiders.
Thank God. Thank God we don't have to talk about the Titans. Oh my God. But I think projected 500 or better, I don't really know if I agree with that criteria fully as like just the only criteria for disappointing, just because a projection doesn't really tell the whole story, and I feel like projections can overrate a lot of teams, but whatever.
Lawrence
Okay.
can't get away from the Chicago Bears and Chris Williams.
Back in 2022, it felt like the Trevor Lawrence experiment had begun to pay off. They made the playoffs and had a huge comeback win in the wild card. Then in 2023, they started the season 8-3. But since then, this team has been on a downwards trajectory. They finished last season 9-8, missing out on the playoffs. Then going into 2024, all signs pointed towards this season being a make or break.
Missed the playoffs due to the Titans. But no, seriously, dude, what has happened in Jacksonville? It is unbelievable. Unbelievable, the sheer failure of the Jacksonville Jaguars the past 2 seasons. It's unbelievable. Like, the defense hasn't been built great. I know that, but the offense, you bring in Doug Peterson to hopefully elevate Trevor Lawrence just that little bit that he needs to certify himself as the top 10 quarterback in the league, and that just didn't happen. It just didn't happen.
That's because after 3 years, we still didn't know if Trevor Lawrence was a franchise quarterback. He had some impressive moments, but certainly wasn't consistent.
If he has another season like he just had, I don't think he's with the Jags after this year. I think I said this on the...
That'd be a stupid mistake. Like, I just said Trevor Lawrence isn't a top 10 quarterback in the league. He's not. But to think that you can ditch him and immediately find someone that has the talent of him is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Now, what do you do with Trevor Lawrence? I have no idea, so I might just be talking.
Going into the 2024 season, odds makers felt like Jacksonville would be about as good as they had been the previous 2 years, but that didn't happen.
Lawrence on the move, launching down the middle, intercepted.
Through 11 games, the Jags were one of the worst teams in the NFL, standing at 2-9. To that point, Trevor Lawrence had put up his worst numbers since his rookie season. Then, unfortunately, he was knocked out of a game where he took one of the worst cheap shots we've seen in a long time. Shortly thereafter, the team placed him on IR, thus ending his season. And it's not just their offense's fault. Their defense has gotten progressively worse over the years, going from 12th in scoring in 2022 to 17th in 2023 And finally, they are ranked 29th in 2024. Overall, it's hard to imagine these guys won't make some big changes come this offseason.
R.I.P. Doug Peterson. See, and this is where we get to the overhyped. Because yes, the Browns made the playoffs last year, but with how Olin Consensual Happy Endings right here played, and knowing he was going to be the starter, were we really expecting... Like, the defense was ultra disappointing. I know the defense was ultra disappointing. It was supposed to be a lot better than it was. But, I mean, the Browns this season, when I watch them or I see their record or whatever, I'm not, disappointing. But we'll hear the reasoning.
In 2023, Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year for overcoming...
They went 11-6? I completely forgot they went 11-6. I completely forgot they went 11. How did they go 11? Well, Joe Flacco did have that run at the end of the season.
Countless quarterback injuries and somehow making the playoffs. Joe Flacco was the big hero in the team's late season heroics. But despite his performances, he wasn't going to be able to stay on the roster because of Deshaun Watson. Owner Jimmy Haslam had invested too much into Watson to have a quarterback controversy, so the team geared up around Watson for a make-or-break year in his career. Because to that...
Deshaun Watson is a whole video by himself, but I just want to make this point, just because originally this was supposed to be a Titans rant about the firing of Rand Carthon and just what has gone on the past 2 years with that team. But Deshaun Watson is an example of what the Titans are, and that is a generational, I don't mean like generationally yada, I mean generation after generation after generation, disappointing, mediocre, and bad teams. Stuff like Deshaun Watson, giving that man that much money to where you're locked into this situation, that's how you stay bad. That's how bad teams stay bad. Firing your GM, only giving him 2 years with 2 different head coaches, 2 different coaching rooms in general, trying to fix a all-time mess up by the previous GM, Rand Carthon, John Robinson, and firing him, ridiculous.
If you are objective about Deshaun Watson's short tenure with the Browns when he's been on the field, it has been an utter disaster. He has been an awful football player.
But even if Watson wasn't expected to be good, this was considered one of the strongest rosters in the NFL. They had a defense that ranked number 1 in multiple categories last season, and the team had enough offensive pieces to feel confident that this team could win in spite of their quarterback, which is why oddsmakers said that they would win around 8 to 9 games. Instead, it was a disaster right away.
It's in the air, and that's intercepted by Kendricks.
In what was perceived to be the easy part of their schedule, the Browns went 1-6. During the stretch, Deshaun Watson put up the worst numbers in the NFL before suffering a devastating torn Achilles. Also, the defense that was once dominant is now struggling, ranking out in the bottom half of the NFL in most categories.
But I don't think they're going to be good enough to beat the Chicago Bears, who I think are going to win 11 games, win the division title. I think they are going to be one of 3 teams this year that has a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense.
Williams to the outside, picked off! Jalen Jones!
And again, this is where we get to projections overrating a team. I'm not entirely sure what the Bears were projected as. I'm sure he'll get to it. But in terms of the Chicago Bears, even the fans I know, like David Miller on TikTok, he was like, yeah, everybody's hyping up this Bears team. I don't know if we even get 8 wins, though. Like, even Bears fans weren't real high on this Bears team. Like, he showed Nick Wright saying to go 11-6. I'm pretty sure universally, everybody saw that and was like, what are you talking about? No, I know there was a lot of hype with Caleb Williams and, oh my God, look at the receiver room and yada. But everybody was still like, yeah, but the coaching staff isn't great. That coaching staff isn't great, and they are in the best division in football.
Prior to the 2024 season, the Bears were media darlings. Everyone and their moms talked about how loaded this roster was, how generational Caleb Williams was going to be, and all the damage these guys were going to do in 2024. Even oddsmakers felt like they were going to be at least decent. winning around 8 to 9 games and competing for a playoff spot. Also, Caleb Williams was the preseason frontrunner to win Rookie of the Year. The beginning of the season was a roller coaster. The Bears looked rough to start, then went on a 3-game win streak, and Caleb looked awesome. Then, just when you thought they were going to win again, they lost on a Hail Mary, and at the time of this recording, haven't won since. And even though Caleb's stats looked solid down the stretch, a lot of his production has come in garbage time. In defense of Caleb, his O-line has been atrocious, and could have been addressed in the previous draft, and they chose not to. As a result, he's taken the most sacks in the NFL by a mile.
I need someone to go back and see how many of them is on him. It's like my boy Theo Ash on TikTok. He'll go through quarterbacks' interceptions and see how many are actually on that quarterback. I need to see how many sacks are on Caleb Williams, because I know dude likes to play like he's still playing in the Pac-12.
Ball in the air and intercepted. Intercepted by Jordan Phillips.
As much as I hate the Jets and I hate Aaron Rodgers, it's obvious you're going to put him on here because they were, in a lot of people's eyes, the favorites to come out of the AFC. I was pretty high on them last year before Aaron Rodgers got hurt, but all last year really soured my taste on Aaron Rodgers, so this year I was kind of hoping they would suck. Thank God they sucked. The dysfunction of the organization, I think, was the main reason they sucked this year. The firing of Robert Saleh, the not making trades based off of Madden ratings, and then Aaron Rodgers sucked. The defense took a step back, and the offensive line was still the New York Jets offensive line of the past 5 years.
2023 was a season that was over before it started, as Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles on the first drive of the year. Even with him back under center entering 2024, it was understandable if fans were cautious due to the injury. But if Rodgers could stay healthy the full season, there was plenty of reason to think that this team was a playoff level team. Now, they are guaranteed to finish with a worse record than last season. One of the areas the team was supposed to be good was defense, which ended up not really happening. And although he's looked good in moments, Rodgers is on pace to finish below the league average in passer rating.
The New York Jets is an example of why you should not completely sell your soul for one player. Even if it's a quarterback and it's the greatest quarterback of all time. The Jets sold their offensive identity, even though there wasn't really one, but they got Nathaniel Hackett. Why? Aaron Rodgers wanted him. They filled up that wide receiver room with Aaron Rodgers guys that weren't that good. They bent over backwards to try to appease this guy, and it butchered their team, which sucks, because they were. The New York Jets 3 years ago were a quarterback away from being real contenders. But because the quarterback they picked to be that quarterback needs all this special treatment, it butchered the team. It completely gutted them, and it's going to take a while for them to recover.
Prescott over the middle, and it's intercepted. It was high that time, and it's picked off by...
The Cowboys, I said this before, this is the first year. Like, the Cowboys have always been a borderline playoff team or playoff team my entire life. But this was the first year where the Cowboys sucked. The Cowboys were bad.
Coming off a 12-5 season, the Cowboys had been thought of as one of the best regular season teams in 2023 before being shocked by the Packers in the playoffs. Entering 2024, outside of losing their D coordinator, there hadn't been a major change to the roster. So there was little reason to think that these guys wouldn't at least be a playoff level team. But through 5 weeks, there were concerns. The team was 3-2, but they had an embarrassing week 2 loss to the Saints, with a chance to prove that they...
Remember that fun little stretch? That fun little stretch where Derek Carr was killing it again and New Orleans was coming back and everybody's like, oh my God, are the Saints something to mess with? That's why you can't trust the first 5 weeks of the NFL.
Their number 1 ranked scoring offense from last season has become unwatchable this season, with the worst rush offense in the NFL. The defense has been an embarrassment, plagued by numerous critical injuries. The difference in this team from 2023 to 2024 is shocking. And with the Eagles and Commanders looking strong, you have to wonder what the Cowboys are even going to do.
7-8 though is still a little bit of a 7-8 is still a bit of an impressive record for how bad they really were.
Hudson. The throw caught. Hudson lost the ball. Looked like a
See, for me, the Bengals, I kind of knew the Bengals were falling off. The Bengals lost a lot defensively, and I've never believed in Zach Taylor, and you were getting drama between Jamar Chase in the front office, T. Higgins in the front office, so it didn't feel like the offense was going to click. It felt like the already average defense was just getting worse. So for me, the Bengals not being good, well, they weren't not good. They were okay. But the Bengals not being like contenders this season, it's not a shock. It's not disappointing, at least for me.
They decided to run things back in 2024 with a similar crew, which was made evident when they franchise tagged T. Higgins. After all, if their offense was clicking like it was during their Super Bowl run a few years back, anything was possible.
4th in Super Bowl odds? No. Like, I don't know who put them that high up. I don't know. Like this, the Bengals were severely overrated coming into this season. Severely overrated.
Through 5 weeks, it was clear that there was a problem, and it wasn't offensively. Joe Burrow and company were producing at a high level, which included putting up 30 plus in 3 straight games. But at the same time, their defense was playing terribly, allowing nearly 30 points a game through 5 weeks. It didn't matter if Jamar Chase had 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. They could still lose. And after 2 more losses where the defense gave up 34 and 44 points, this team was cooked.
It really goes to show you like how much of a team sport football is. And I really hate how people come on here onto these talk shows and talk about like Joe Burrow needs to do this. This season is a hit on Joe Burrow. It's a slight on Joe. How? How? The dude was going out scoring damn near every single drive, and his defense was just selling over and over and over again. His kicker was missing over and over and over again.
There at all is picked up by Justin Reed.
The 49ers are definitely disappointing. Definitely. This is one of the teams where absolutely it should be on every disappointing list. You could bring up, well, Jack, the injuries. The 49ers deal with injuries every single year. Every single year, the 49ers team is decimated with injuries and they find reasons to win. Now, maybe this year was finally the year where they find out that that's not feasible to do year in and year out. But, I mean, the 49ers were gutted every year by injuries. They were one of the top teams in injuries every single year. Same with like the Baltimore Ravens, but they would still find ways to win. You know, this season, with how bad the 49ers were, missing the playoffs entirely, absolutely. Probably the biggest disappointment in the league. You just thought they'd figure it out. You thought that they would eventually figure it out, turn around, and make a playoff push. But they just didn't.
After a back and forth of whether or not they were going to trade Brandon Ayuk, they ended up signing him to a big deal, which meant that the most important pieces to this team were back.
And he sucked. Every time I watched the 49ers game, Brandon Ayuk was dropping everything.
The next thing that happened was just minutes before their first game, Christian McCaffrey was unable to go.
But the Christian McCaffrey announcement coming out of nowhere, that seems like a much bigger deal, because how long is Christian McCaffrey not playing for? Because we didn't know this was even possible there for him.
You remember when like gamblers got pissed off, gamblers and fantasy football players, like, this should be illegal. This should be illegal. I shut up.
He had an injury that was treated as a minor problem to that point, and he was supposed to play in that first game. Instead, he was not only out for just that game, but for the first 8 games. A major blow to this team, considering he was an MVP candidate last season. To make matters worse, he only played in 4 games before suffering a season-ending knee injury. As for the team, they scratched and clawed their way to...
Is CMC back? He had 2 years where it's like, oh my God, here's the guy that was early in Carolina, yada, yada, yada. Thank God he's in 49ers uniform. Maybe he'll stay healthy. Is CMC back? The CMC we all know and are very much disappointed by?
Brock Purdy, an amazing story the last 2 years, had now begun to struggle. And this team just couldn't escape the injury bug, especially at running back, as they were down to their 5th string starter by week 16.
That's ridiculous. As much as I want to say, the 49ers are decimated by injuries year in and year out, This is ridiculous.
Meanwhile, the team that signed their backup quarterback from last year looks like a Super Bowl contender.
Darnold, the pressure, senses, throws, goes end
End of the video.
touchdown Vikings, it's Adam.
End of the video, he's just going to flex that the Vikings got. Well, I guess we saw how Sam Darnold looked against the Lions, but one team I'm shocked that wasn't on here, the Dolphins. I would have definitely put the Dolphins on here. I know the Dolphins, I don't think were like projected to be world beaters, but they were never really a real threat to the AFC East, like to the Bills. Yeah, they were the second best team, but that's because the Patriots and Jets just sucked. Yeah, they were in the playoff race, but you expected them to be a lot better. Who else would I have put on here? AFC West, no. AFC South, no. NFC South, no. I mean, the Falcons were just confusing this year. NFC East, no. North, no. NFC West. The Seahawks, maybe. Maybe, but I wasn't real high on the Seahawks, but beautiful video.